Insum Insider.
Welcome to the Inside. This is the Insum Insider, your source for Oracle Apex tips, techniques, methodology, and really wherever that discussion takes us. I'm your host, Monty and Michelle, the kid with the lid, coming to you from the American Riviera, that is the Texas Gulf Coast. And with me today is my good friend and member of the Insum family, Michelle Scamany. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, Monty.
At the helm. Keeping us on time and task is our producer, French-Canadian, Mark Rule. And Mark, we appreciate everything you do for us. It's Thursday, April 8th, Season 2, Episode 7. Thank you for spending a piece of your afternoon with us. We're worldwide, coming to you live today on YouTube and Facebook. The Insum Insider is, of course, sponsored by Insum, and that's the name. If you're doing anything at all with Apex and you need a lifeline, reach out to us. We offer everything from coaching and mentoring all the way through turnkey project management and Apex development. We're laser focused on Apex, and we have been since 2004. Michelle, here we go again, adding another piece to the Insum cinematic universe. You've got the, I love that term. You've got the Insider. You've got the French Insider, the quick tips, foyer thoughts. This is turning into a full-time gig for you. Foyer tips, yeah.
Yeah, some weeks it feels like a full-time gig. So this week is an insider week, obviously. So we're doing 2 insiders, the French and the English. And then, of course, and we do those every 2 weeks. And then every week, of course, we have the instant tips and the foyer tips. So a week like this, we've got 4 of them going. So it does feel like we're on all the time. But, you know, hopefully people are enjoying it, getting some value out of it. We love connecting with people, our, you know, the community, our clients. Yeah, we enjoyed, and hopefully people are getting a sense a little bit of who we are as well. So it isn't obviously, you know, just my full-time job. We've got a whole team that helps us run this. So we've got Mark, who does most of the production. Thankfully, Francis, Luc, Sylvain, they take care of the French insiders. Anton and Hayden, they've got the instant tips running like clockwork. And then the new show with Stephen, he just comes on and does his stuff. So there's a lot going on, but hopefully people are enjoying it.
Well, if you like what we're putting out, tell a friend. If you don't like it, tell us. That's what I like to say.
Good one. Yep.
Well, I'm really looking forward to today's show, Michelle. On deck, we have a good buddy of mine and a friend of the Apex community, Brad Cardinal. And by day, he's the CTO for Clay Lacy Aviation in Dallas, Texas, just to my north. And they're doing some wonderful things with Apex. He's here to tell us all about it. So, Michelle, what say you bring him on?
I will bring Brad on. Brad, welcome.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Hello, Brad. Welcome. It's great to have you with us.
Great to be here. Looking forward to this.
We met in person for the first time. I think we had met online a long time before that, but we met in person for the first time in Chicago at K-Scope 16. And right. I learned a lot that week. Namely, you are a beast at the poker table. It's not always you don't always learn things just in the session rooms.
Everyone would talked about, Monty's poker game. And then we ended up with when we started out with 3 tables that night, and it got brutal. We went deep. That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. And that's what I look forward to getting back, in person to the conference circuit, because again, it's not just what happens in the sessions. It's everything else. It's the hallway conversations. It's those late nights that we all enjoy, and bonding, and that's really what we miss, and that's really been the focus on why we're doing this effort too. Is we really miss that interaction. We miss you guys.
Yeah, no, totally. I'm so looking forward to 22 at this point, because we're Nashville got skipped this year, and there's so much cutting edge stuff that comes out of all the major players. I mean, just you learn so much at every K-Scope, and how quickly it just drives down into whatever you're working on. I really feel like we've lost personally, I've just lost Apex momentum for the last 2 years, just not having Kscope to go and just, fill my head with things, and not just the inspirational part of it, but the real practical stuff.
Well,
True.
so to be fair, Kscope is happening. It's going to be a virtual event. It's not the same thing, but in terms of keeping the momentum going and learning, and that's all definitely going to be happening this year, and we're looking forward to that. But yeah, look at this, Monty. I learned something every episode. So poker, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
I remember that same Kscope. Michelle was actually trying to teach me poker, and that did not go over very well at all.
Well, one of the things that we've had a lot of fun with over the last few months, in addition to poker, is Two Truths and a Lie. And we're going to do this now, Two Truths and a Lie, the Brad Cardinal edition. What we're going to do is we're going to throw 3 things up on the screen. One of these is a lie. 2 of these are true. So if we can throw them up there.
Oh, Mark, go ahead. I'll keep my finger off the buzzer. There you go.
The first item is Brad was a roadie for Tina Turner. Brad was a roadie for Tina Turner. I know Nutbush City Limits is definitely playlist for me. Number 2, Brad is a licensed pilot, currently working on his instrument rating. Good luck. Good luck. Number 3, Brad was born a New York Yankee, but he got to Texas as soon as he could, I suppose. All right, so one of those is a lie. So if you can identify which one is a lie, put it in the comments. We have a lot of fun with that every episode. All right, now we're going to talk about Clay Lacy, and I understand, just from the get-go here, I understand there's some things that you can freely discuss, and there's some things that you probably don't want to get into, trade secrets, competitive advantages, and that kind of stuff. I completely understand that. So tell us what you can about Clay Lacy and what's going on there, and nothing that we shouldn't hear.
Okay.
Like, what are your current initiatives?
Well, right now, Clay Lacy is a 50-year-old aviation company, and it's actually, from a technology standpoint, it's actually 4 different companies. Our biggest initiative right now is implementing a new flight operations software package from a company called Flex out of Vienna, Austria. And then as part of that front end, building out a whole Apex backend for all the back office infrastructure, where there needs to be audited automations for accounting integration, filtering data out of other systems like payroll that update the master lookup data in Flex, and vice versa when we master data in Flex, bringing it back down and creating just a comprehensive single point of entry for a lot of that information for our flight crews, for our back office departments, our sales group, all of those sorts of things, and try to just limit the number of places they have to go to get meaningful information in the current status of things, because a lot of our industry happens in very short time. When you look at from the time that a flight is scheduled to go and making sure that it's good to go, our turn time on that is really, really truncated compared to a lot of industries. And so the idea that we could limit that down to is just as few screens as somebody would need to go to. If the primary system like a Flex or another SaaS product is not their primary work tool, but if it's a secondary tool, but they are needed to plug in, that's a big part of the initiative of what we're doing right now with Apex. And then that's also building a whole back-end infrastructure for a new customer portal that we're going to be rolling out through Q2 through the end of the year. And we can talk about some of that, not a whole lot of it, because we don't want to obviously bury the lead there. But the major initiatives right now are building all the back office support all through Apex to deal with that, and also getting our Oracle Cloud set up, our Apex instance in the Oracle Cloud, ready to be the backstop for all of the public facing stuff that we're going to do in Apex.
Are you? How are these apps communicating? Just REST, or is it using the integration cloud, or?
We're actually we're using REST. We're also using an integration tool called Jitterbit. One of the things that we have, Jitterbit, it's a multifaceted integration tool that also allows us to publish our own API set. So that as we have trading partners come on and we want to release an API to them that might be, multi-system or more complicated than we would want to do, say through ORDS, then we can go ahead and build that out in Jitterbit, and it can actually go and aggregate all that data and then expose that as a REST or SOAP.
Interesting.
And it works out, and it works really, really cleanly with Oracle and with ORDS. So there's a lot of good orchestration we can do, and a big piece of that is supportability. One of the legacy problems that we've had at Clay Lacy is that we've had silos of technology in different areas, and when things, when there's an inevitable problem, the time to support and to get it corrected and get back online, especially from their notification, has mostly been about waiting for user notification. The user recognizes the issue. And so by putting in an Apex run system, and then also having Jitterbit as an orchestrator for the more complex integrations that talk to non-Oracle systems, we're able to get a single pane of glass of all the integration activity that's going on within the company. So we can know on the IT side that there's a problem long before a user has to report it or notice it.
It's interesting. Isn't that, Monty, we seem to be seeing a lot more of that, right? Using Apex as an integration tool. So this idea of giving users, your community, a one-stop shop for access to everything. I think that's a great use case, and that's where Apex can really shine.
Yeah, I like that idea too, is to use Apex as kind of a hub, because you've got these other apps that you rely on, but every app is going to have some gaps, and so Apex plugs the gaps and can pull together all the siloed information. So yeah, you guys are headed in the right direction. So it certainly seems. How did Apex find its way to Clay Lacy? I'm assuming you had something to do with it.
I of course had something to do with that. Sure. I've been in general aviation IT for 25 years now. My very first company was an Oracle-based client server product that's still on the market out of Austin, Texas, called Continuum. And I started with them in 1998, and that's where I really started cutting my teeth on Oracle. And about the time that I was leaving them, a buddy of mine recruited me to go work for a French company. There's a French aircraft manufacturer, Dassault. I was starting to get into Apex 3.2. And while I was working at Dassault, we started building some things internally for the department I was working in, and in support of the finance department and some other operations. And so as we went through, starting in 3 up into 4.2, moving up in as Apex matured, it got broader and broader. We did a full customer portal in that at the time, which was really, really successful for the company. And at the time, the VP of sales there, he had since moved on, and he went to Clay Lacy, and he's an officer at Clay Lacy now. And a couple of years ago, they were looking at doing some transformation and really looking at coming out of their legacy stack and dealing with some of the more modern problems that they have today of geography, just complexity, supportability, those sorts of things. And looking at what we had done at Falcon Jet, it was a natural step for me to come over to Clay Lacy as a natural evolution of my career. And so from there, it was really just starting to strategically do a couple of things. One is just build a footprint, do some evangelizing, start bringing on some citizen developers. We've got a couple of really great citizen developers that are building some departmental Apex apps. And so people are realizing that things can happen really, really quickly in the Apex world. We can produce content, useful things very, very quickly. And so it's got us into sort of a 3-phase approach. And the 3 phases are just, realize, evangelize, weaponize. Realize the problem or opportunity, go build something, get it out there, let the user start using it, evangelize it. They'll start driving themselves into it, wanting to do more of it. And then you're just sort of controlling that floodgate of people wanting to do things in Apex. And then once you reach critical mass, then you can weaponize it. You can either drive it down into the company and create more value for the company, either by reducing costs or turn time, increasing efficiency, or you can leverage it on a customer facing side, make it a net benefit for the customer. And either way, you make those things become a differentiator between you and your competition. And so that weaponization gets turned over directly to sales, directly to marketing, and say, there are things that we do better, stronger, faster. And Apex is a critical piece of that for how we weaponize our own improvements internally.
Did you have
Mark,
to build a
I hope
team?
you're taking.
Sorry,
I was going to say, Mark, I hope you're taking notes. I was going to ask you, Brad, those 3 words, are those yours? And have you trademarked them?
I have not. No, I have not trademarked them. But yeah, those are mine. Yeah, realize, evangelize,
fantastic.
Weaponize.
They're fantastic. I love that.
Now, when you showed up there with Apex under your arm, did you have a team in place, or did you have to build a team once you got to Clay Lacy? And one other thing too, is it true that they sweetened the deal by giving you full jet and pilot access on the weekends?
I can count on one hand the number of private jet rides I've taken. That they are very few and far between and precious. And it's a fabulous ride. If you ever get a chance to fly in a premium jet, I totally recommend it. Yeah, that's a whole nother. We could talk forever on different airplanes. It's sort of like the muscle car versus exotic car argument. You'd be surprised. It's very similar. No, I didn't have a team. I've got a really good IT staff at Clay Lacy, but we didn't have. We had very little Oracle experience. One of the things we have on our maintenance side is the company I used to work for in Austin back in the 90s. We use that product still. So that was the cornerstone of having an Oracle footprint in there. So the first thing we did, we came in and started building a couple of little bolt-ons for that to make it more functional. And then just started doing, stood up a nice XE instance in house and just started doing some proof of concepts with that, just to do a little bit of realizing, a little bit of evangelizing, and then, waited for the right timing as we're getting into a bigger arc of other systems. There was a lot of other things we had to do with legacy moving forward. So as we got into the arc, then we went out and set up an Oracle Cloud instance and started building, production applications out there and really targeting our weakest group, which is our geographically dispersed employees, mostly our flight crews. And then also we have sales and maintenance people that are all over the country. And the idea that we can produce something that lives out on the Oracle Cloud in a nice Apex instance that's secure and robust, that they can get to, that gets us out of the legacy environment of, Citrix-based VDI and, other means of basically getting to, them coming to us. And we want to flip that over. We want to go to them. We completely weaponize geography and make sure that anybody anywhere doing anything for Clay Lacy, they just have one entry point, come in through Apex. Even if it branches out into other systems, we can get them that data. If it branches over to, a SharePoint site or branches into one of our SaaS apps, all that stuff can be aggregated through that single entry point. And then we can really control the experience. If they're like a flight crew, they're heavily phone-based users. Pilots, they're more phone and iPad. So I can't even really count on one form factor. So we really need to tailor that experience for them. And it's really, really competitive. Flight crews, they hop around with airplanes. They follow their customers from company to company. So they don't stay with us. So attracting good talent and keeping them, what we do for them technically to make their job frictionless is a huge part of our attraction. And that's a big area of weaponization that we work with flight ops and with HR on, in terms of what would make it easier to attract good talent in flight crews and to keep them.
Oh boy, that's something that you don't really hear about, is how your systems are going to attract the talent to the company. That's awesome.
When people have options and they can go wherever they have the least amount of hassle to do their job, and there's a lot of industries like that. There are a lot of industries where people want to be left alone to do their primary task.
Very interesting.
Whether that's a mechanic fixing something, a pilot flying something, a coder coding something. There's a lot of people who don't want to deal with expense reports, and they don't want to deal with schedules, and they don't want to deal with timesheets, and they don't want to deal with regulatory items. They just want to be left alone to fix their thing. But the age of having a fleet of admins sitting in a cube farm somewhere doing all that stuff is long gone. So IT has to fill that gap, and Apex is the kind of tool that has to fill that gap.
I think you're right. I think smart people, when they're considering a new company, that's the kind of things they should look at, or these systems. Mm-hmm. But that's very interesting. Very interesting.
When we were talking and sort of in preparation for today, one of the things you said was when you started working with HTML with Apex 3.2. I was going to call it HTML-DB because that's what it was when I first started working with it. You said right away you knew this was a game changer.
Oh yeah.
And so it sounds like it's been a real game changer for your business.
The first big power app we built was a resource planning app that scheduled mechanics to work on airplanes. And I remember the day that I discovered collections and how I could just dump a ton of data into a collection and then build out whatever kind of array on the screen I needed to. It was like, and we just went to town, and that app's still in use. And we built that. Oh my God. 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it's still just chugging along.
And now
the slate theme, the sand theme.
Yeah.
It was,
everything I did early was always sand.
It was sand, and whatever the really red one. I can't remember the name of it.
The red one.
It was clean. It had that the top nav and everything was really, really clean. It looked very corporate.
If you know what theme we're talking about, put it in the comments, because I know we have some old timers listening in here. I asked Stephen Feuerstein the other day about what in his opinion, what was the most underused, underappreciated feature, and he said collections. He sounds like you agree.
I was having dinner with a very good Apex developer, very good friend of mine, Brian Hill, last night, and he and I were talking about all the modern things we're doing, because he's at Oracle now and working on some advanced stuff. He's working with Scott's group, and he and I have done some things way back in the blast. He helped me at Falcon Jet, and we've done some side things. And the one thing we talked about is what are our favorite things? that are just enduring. And I'm like, my go-to is collections by far.
Hmm.
And and which is there, and I would like to see another like killer feature that I would get really enamored with come along that would do that for me. Um, because I think, but we talked about how it's interesting how you can hold on to those, and Apex is one of the few systems where you can have something like that, and it's just as relevant today as it was 12 years ago, because of how well they maintain all that the compatibility and just the power. And then we go back to the age-old discussion of my favorite feature of Apex is Oracle. You've got the realization that you have the entire engine, you have that entire engine, you have every single package, every single function, every single feature, behind there, and it's like it's like a classic American muscle car. You walk up and you have clean lines, and it's very purposeful, and that it's meant to do good work. And then you open a hood, and there's just this monster engine behind, inside of it, and you're like, oh my God, what are we going to do with this? And that's exactly what Apex is like. I mean, it's really, when I think of it in terms of system, it is not like a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. It is really like a big old 1970s muscle car.
Yeah, somebody mentioned to me that Apex is sexy, and I'm thinking, I guess in the same way that muscle car can be sexy.
Yeah,
Brad's making it sound pretty sexy.
Yeah. Now you're talking about the systems you built at Clay Lacy. Do you have any? These people are all over the planet.
Right.
Or did you ever have a need to do anything disconnected, or everything is assumed connectivity with all your Apex apps?
We don't worry about disconnected, but we do worry about low bandwidth connectivity. So there's one of our new things with our customer portal. Obviously, on the backside of that, we also have employee based things that we're working on, and we're purposely working on those to make sure that low bandwidth is acceptable where we can. We're building out progressive web apps. I'm hugely inspired by the Fabi project, and Michelle, you were a piece of that, and a bunch of the Insumers are a piece of that. That was hugely inspiring for me to really see something go to market that was Apex based, that was a progressive web app, but it was a progressive web app just for the features of convenience and portability, low bandwidth, not necessarily the classic of I need to be able to do full offline or any of that. It was just the right amount of touch of that, and I'm everything that's been written by that, everything that Vincent blogged about that, I'm totally ripping that off for my customer portal, because I want to have that really clean, smooth experience in the progressive web app mode. That's just that I hope that our owners are going to really, really love.
Weaponize it, man. Weaponize it.
Totally, absolutely.
So this might be a dumb question. Is all of your new development then you're doing it with Apex, or have you also got other tools that you're doing development with? And what would be the deciding factor there?
We are doing all the public facing stuff. We're doing everything in Apex. So customer portal, employee based applications, especially externally facing stuff, all that's going to be in Apex. Number one reason, security. There's a big target on our back in this industry because we deal with corporations that are very publicly known. Big corporations own jets, high net worth people own jets. So there's a big target on our back. We get hit and probed and are constantly having to worry about the accessibility to our systems, and it is overly restrictive to the point that it makes it hard to do business, and it's especially hard for our customers. Our aircraft owners and some of our other, high use customers. For them, they look at us and they're like, well, it should just be like an airline. I should just have an app and I should be able to, go grab my airplane or go see what it's doing or do whatever. And then, and we don't want them to worry about the security of that. We absolutely don't want them to worry about. But by having the super secure simplified stack that you get with Oracle and with Apex, it takes a lot of the worry out of the equation. You follow best practices, you work with quality vendors, you work in you put it in a good cloud instance, or you put it in a solid on-prem instance. And the security is one thing you can check off relatively quick. And it's really easy to audit and know that you're doing well. And so from that standpoint, we're doing a lot of the customer facing stuff in Oracle. Internally, we still have a lot of SQL Server where we use Dynamics GP. So we do SQL Server. We have an ECM workflow tool from Highland called OnBase. So we have a lot of activity in that. We do. There's a lot of flow through. But as we're able to integrate and again create those single panes of glass in Apex to peer into those other systems, if you're not a power user, having to use that system is your day to day. But I'm an ancillary user, and I need to reference information or do simple transactions that I can get a REST service for, then let's do an Apex app for that. I don't need to do the extra licensing. I don't need to do the extra support of installing, the heavier thick clients in the case of GP, or have a fleet of every single one of those has their own web server for the app, that does the app service for their lightweight tool. And if I don't have to do that, if I can just give you a browser and deal with that in the back end, we're going to be a happier company. And I can extend that a lot further through the geography than I would necessarily be able to do. Otherwise, I'd be back into, well, let me stand up a virtual in Citrix and let you tunnel in through that, or let me give you a VPN and let you tunnel in through that. And this way, I don't have to deal with any of that stuff.
I'm not surprised that there's other stacks out there. I worked for an Oracle shop prior to joining Insum, and one time the system admin told me, he says, "Would you believe we have more SQL Server databases here than we do Oracle databases?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" But it's all these embedded databases that come with the other products that you use.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, SQL Server is great for a lot of things. We also, we do a lot of stuff. We're a big Microsoft shop. In general, we use Microsoft 365. So we use SharePoint. We're investing in our SharePoint intranet to do proper intranet, because with the advent of Teams, how really seamless that is and intuitive for a lot of users to do really good, easy quality stuff. And there's no need to build anything for that. What you would have been like simple project, like, PTrack kind of project site, apps that we would have built in Apex. I can do all that in a team site now. I don't need to spend resources on that. So there's a really good use of that. But now with Graph, I can hit every single thing out of the Microsoft universe. Everything that you would put in Microsoft 365 is available to the Apex apps. So, we're doing, image fetches, document lists, SharePoint lists, all that stuff is really so much easier than the old days of having to go download the Alexandra suite and then pick out those little functions, and grab all the bits there. We're so beyond that. And and Alexandra's great. Don't get me wrong. That's still a great repo, but Microsoft's made that so much easier. And so we're really looking forward to leveraging that part, just so that we can, again, make everybody give that single point of seamless single glass that they can come in through, and then get to everything that they need to, and we can just control the spigot. One other big area of technology is authentication. We're working with a company called Okta, who's an authenticator for all of our customer-facing external authenticators. And one of the things I really want to be able to offer is, and Apex works seamlessly with it. It's really, really beautiful. Is I want every customer to be able to come in and say, "Hey, can you authenticate this way? I want to be able to use my Google or Facebook or my LinkedIn." And the bigger concern is, we take over a corporate flight department, and they want all their employees to use their corporate login. So rather than having to roll my own OAuth 2 and do some crazy redirect, like that, I can go build that out in Okta. They just come in, hit one point of glass, and then every single product that we ever put out there, a Clay Lacy customer would only ever have one set of credentials anywhere, and I would never have to know those credentials. So again, for security, I don't have to worry about a user getting compromised on the authentication side. I don't have to worry about password and token management on my side, the durable information like that. Okta handles all that real time. I go get my token, they're in, I let them do their session, they drop out. And it makes it's a security play, but it's also a convenience play, because, we could do 4 or 5, we could do white label apps for a customer that has a particular need. It's a very diverse sort of business line that we're in. And so I want to make sure that all you need to come to me one time with is an email address and say, "This is who I am to Clay Lacy," and I can get you into anything we do.
Yeah, we have a number of clients that use Okta for authentication as well. That kind of ties into Eric's question here about using Azure, but it sounds like do you use Okta for everything, or just your client facing?
I'm just using Okta for client facing. We are using Azure. We're using AAD for all of our internal auth. That works great, obviously. It's pretty native in Apex. So there's really no magic to doing that. It's the only annoyance we've had some customers is depending on how you hop around and how you do your token, you can end up having to do the multiple SSO clicks. So you hop into a new app and it's like, oh, hey, for whatever reason, it wants you to retokenize. And so you get that same pop-up again. But we get that with all the Microsoft apps already. So users are used to it. And so we don't, for doing that on the internal side is really not a big deal. And I really like it because, password reset requested, that help desk go down. User security goes down. We have, again, with the geography we have, if somebody calls because they've got a flight in the middle of the night and they want to get into something because they need to get to a piece of information or to an app that's going to help them do their trip, and they can't make their trip, or they can't do the trip they need to do because they can't get to something. I'd rather not get that call at 3 a.m. I'd rather, that they're able to get authenticated, get in, do their business, because, they're sitting over in, London or mainland Europe, with their principal trying to get home.
What's the makeup of your current team? Do you offer 24-hour support, or these guys are pretty self-sufficient overnight?
Yeah, they're remarkably self-sufficient. I mean, we're on call 24/7. I don't have an active help desk 24/7 because our day. I mean, our day mostly starts about, say, 5 a.m. Eastern. It runs through about 8 p.m. Pacific. So that's a typical day, and we stagger who's keeping an eye on the farm all the way through the day, and mostly just follow our flight paths. When we start up morning planning on the East Coast, that's that's our things. We get up early and we start doing system checks, making sure BDR worked. All the BDR was good. Make sure nothing came in on the help desk overnight that didn't come in through the actual call-in hotline. And just try to knock down everything as early as we can in the morning. And it's a good advantage for us because we dispatch a lot out of California. And so if I can get on a dispatch problem early in the morning before the sun's even up in California, we can knock out a lot of system related things early in the day.
Yeah. Well, as far as the makeup of your team, you said you don't have a big team now. You started from sounds like very little, and you started to put pieces in place. What does it look like?
There's me plus one on the Apex front, and then we've brought along 2 citizen developers, both completely green, had never touched anything. They'd done some things in early life or college, or they'd build some stuff out in like a SharePoint, or build out workflows in a HubSpot kind of thing. And they took to it really, really well. We just actually last month we took a whole department off of Salesforce and brought all of their material into an Apex app, all built by a first-time user named Mirta, who's awesome, and built it out, pushed it out on our cloud, and now that whole group is doing running all of their lookup and primary record keeping on all the aircraft that they take care of, all in that system. And the whole project end to end was like 2.5 months. I mean, it was the best case story of doing a citizen developer project where I did the heavy lifting back end queries. And then once I gave her a set of widgets to work with, she built up the pages, worked with her group on, tailoring it to how they wanted, they really, made it exactly sort of what they wanted to do. And now they're ready to go to the next level, which with some, much harder items. But they got an exact drop in for what they were doing with Salesforce, and being able to sunset Salesforce is one of our big initiatives this year, because it's really complex. If it's the kind of work you do for CRM, it's a great tool, but it was way overkill for what our needs are. So we've transitioned down into HubSpot, which is much more marketing customer focused. And then we're extending that with Apex, and that's going to be a really, really good combination for us.
Yeah. These solutions that you're building with Apex, they're right sized. It's not like there's this big and you're only using this much. Now, she didn't come to the project with a bunch of PL SQL. She didn't come to the project with a bunch of JavaScript or CSS. Nope. She just picked it up as she went along.
Very much so. Yeah, she'd seen a little bit of SQL in college, and she had messed with a little bit of in an MIS class in college because she's a recent graduate, and she'd done a few things. And so I put her on Apex, and we did 2 sessions and walked through this is how things go together, how you make a page. This is how you make a shared component, how you do a lookup on a table or a view. And then I gave her just turned her loose and said, here's a standard package, a template for building tables. Use this, just add the extra columns you need. And she literally did everything, built all her tables, did all her own data imports from Salesforce, export, import, using the SQL tools inside of Apex. Didn't even have to give her a separate IDE. And she knocked it out. It was great.
So great. Now she's just waiting for her next one, right? Her next project.
No, absolutely not. She's got a ton of other projects, but she's working on her master's degree, and she's working on some and she's also in our sales group doing things for aircraft management sales. So she's got a full plate, but she's a fantastic resource, and she takes care of being the interface between us and those guys.
And there she is. She's watching. I don't know if you're watching the comments, but Matt definitely echoes your feeling about her being awesome. So
I assume that Matt's one of our sales guy, one of our aircraft management sales, who's down in your neck of the woods, Monty.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've got some great people, some key people around you. Like, are you still coding on a daily basis, or are you just inject yourself kind of where needed?
I know I'm coding. Well, I'm coding on a daily basis because we're deep into the Flex integration for our new product Flex. So I'm definitely coding on a daily basis. I don't ever want to get away from coding. I really like it. And I like doing a lot of proof of concept stuff. And then one of the things I'm really bad at is instrumentation, just habitually. So in my perfect cadence is I'll build out a proof of concept. I'll build it out using our best practices from start to ready to come out of test, and then I'll have somebody come in behind and do a cleanup, put in the instrumentation, and then also make sure that we're really following best practices for performance, and especially when it gets down into the heavy PL SQL stuff. It's just it's for whatever reason it's just never been something that I excel at. And we use Logger and so it's pretty straightforward to do, but there's a lot of things that we do that are also regulated. And so having good auditing, having good instrumentation so that we know if data is integral, that that all the transactions were doing exactly what we want them to do, so that if an FAA regulator were to come in and say, let me see the backup for all this stuff, that we know it's going to be good, and we can say that here's our best practice for how we audit and how we log all of our applications. That's really actually very important as the government comes along. That the FAA is notoriously dealing with the lowest common denominator of paper-based shops that are doing everything on paper still. And although there's a good effort and a good path for taking things electronic, it is not as clean as a lot of industries because they have to cater to that lowest common denominator. So what that means for us is that we can sell anything to the feds about this is how we're going to operate, and everything's going to be all electronic, and everything will be digitally signed off, and everything we can go as far as blockchaining everything if we wanted to. But really it's just about meeting a very discrete set of requirements for show me how you're doing it today, show me how it meets the regulation, and then show me how I audit it, and let me go see how the back end of that looks when we have a question, or if there is an incident, how I can go look at that information and know that is what you're showing me is actually really what happened. So, and again, Apex and Oracle is great for that.
Monty, how about we throw up the 2 truths and a lie?
Oh yeah, let's good. Okay, just to remind everyone, one of these is totally false. 2 of these are completely true. So you tell us which one is false. Put it in the comments. Brad was a roadie for Tina Turner. Brad is a licensed private pilot currently working on his instrument rating. And thirdly, that he was a Yankee. Oh my gosh, a Yankee down in Texas. All right, so put your answers in the comments. We like to have fun with this. Now, question: the grounding of like the 737 Maxes, how does that impact Clay Lacy, or does it impact Clay Lacy?
That really didn't impact us directly because that's a bigger class of aircraft than we mostly deal with. I mean, we get into some larger airplanes, but not nearly as much. We do some of that on the charter side where we'll actually arrange a larger aircraft for somebody. But in terms of the aircraft we manage, that's a bigger class.
So I thought maybe it was pushing everything down. Like things that flights and crews that were using airlines that were using a 737 Max, they were getting pushed down into the smaller footprints.
No, because the way aircraft are type certified, everyone is really a snowflake. And what happened? Well, I don't want to get into much speculation because I am certainly not I don't claim to be an aerospace expert on some of these things. And I've talked to pilots and I've talked to engineers about what really happened there. And the general consensus is that there was a big training gap with crews. There were some corners cut by Boeing, obviously, but there's also a training gap that goes on there. But every aircraft is a snowflake. Every aircraft you fly, the crew is type certified and trained on that particular aircraft. So and some aircraft platforms have trouble, especially newer ones, and some don't. Some are come out of the gate just swinging and they're awesome. We had a story back in 2008 when I was with Dassault. A brand new aircraft came online, beautiful aircraft, the 7X. And a CEO and his family of a very high-end Fortune 500 company were flying to Hawaii, and halfway across the Pacific, the whole aircraft shorted out, and and it was a night flight, and they did the whole back end of that flight with their kids in complete darkness on that airplane.
Wow.
Whoa.
And so, and the crew did great, and the fix was everything. But and it was a completely unexpected engineering, oddity with that particular airplane. But it grounded that whole fleet. All the 7Xs got put on the ground for like 3 months. And so, and then they found the problem and they came up with a fix for it. But it's real interesting to see what'll come along and what could ground a fleet of a particular type of aircraft. And then how you deal with that as a business and how you grow out of it, because it was, that was 2008, which is also a recession. And, that was really tough for the company to absorb at the time. And that's just the kind of thing, but it only affected that one aircraft. There were 5 other models of Falcon that were unaffected by it, and they were still flying strong. So
they started flying those the MAX aircraft again, haven't they?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
I'm
not sure.
They just did. They're just coming back online.
And are they having? Do we know? Are they having trouble getting people on those flights? I don't know how I'd feel if I found out I was flying one of them.
I flew on one actually recently. When they first came online, I happened to be on one. It was fun. But there's
obviously
it varies. It gets really, really complicated, because then you get into unions and what the unions are willing to do, and the comfort level of the crews and the comfort level of the passengers. The passengers seem to be the less concern in that. But that's that's commercial aviation versus general aviation where I'm in. So it's not really even, that's a whole different world in a lot of ways.
There's a cable show called I think it's like Why Aircraft Crash or something, why planes crash or something. And my dad's a former private pilot, and so I'll go over there and he's watching that. After you watch that show a couple of episodes, you don't want to ever get on a plane, because it talks about how all these things that can go wrong and that kind of stuff. But generally, it's such a safe thing. It's grounded in physics. You've got lift that works every time.
Every time.
So.
Well, ironically, and to swing that back to Apex, we have internally every company is required to have an emergency response team that deals with an incident with an aircraft, and it could be a little incident, or it could be a big incident, any kind of incident. And you have an emergency response program that you have to follow. That deals with everything from notifications to the to the FAA and in your internal response and how you deal with everything. And this could deal with literally anything, like the aircraft had a leak and spilled fuel on a tarmac, all the way through a major incident. And we are actually just finishing up building our whole tactical ERP system as an Apex app, so that in the classic sense, you would have a war room and everybody would go into the war room, and then you'd fire up a conference line and get everybody on the phone, and you would work the tactical ERP event from the war room. Well, as geography has gotten our company more spread out, and as COVID had also put more people out of the office, we needed to do our war room virtually. And, because there are very specific things, very specific checklists that we have to do, very specific forms we have to compile, it was a very obvious thing to drive into Apex. So we have a whole TAC ERP Apex app that we're just wrapping up. The whole back end's done. All we're dealing with now is the actual war room, like when you sit in and see all the real-time activity going on with all the different stakeholders in the ERP response group. That's the last piece we're putting on right there. And my good buddy Guillermo Hernandez is working on that, and he's doing a great job for us.
Oh, we're glad to hear that. We're glad to hear that. So before we pivot, because I want to talk about your local efforts there at the Dallas-Fort Worth Apex user group, because you guys are doing great work on the ground there. Is there anything else? Anything else you want to hit at? You mentioned the portal project. When is that? When does it look like that's going to hit?
We'll start rolling out in Q2, end of Q2. And then we've got, it's a 5-phase project. So it's going to be rolling out all through the rest of this year and into next year as we add, because we have an existing portal, a legacy portal, and we need to get users over into the new portal doing what they're used to doing today, in terms of what they see and the features of that. And then we want to enrich that once we get over getting them re-authenticated, because it'll have a whole new authentication scheme, and just getting them used to what they're looking at, because we've worked with a company called Nexstar on brand new UX UI. It's going to be very different for them. So we want to keep it. We want to keep the feature set out of the gate very simple and comparable to what they're using today, so that they can absorb the new UX UI, and then we'll enrich that through staged. And here's the next bit, and here's the next bit. And that way we're not overwhelming them and driving them away from adoption, because they're like, oh, this is just too much, or, and either it'll be too much and they won't use it, or it'll be too new and they'll hate it, which will still hit us on adoption. So we really want to do that in a very clean sort of way.
Very true. Very, very true. All right, now what? Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just gonna before I wasn't sure if you were gonna pivot to the community work yet, but as when we were talking in some of our prep sessions, Brad, you'd mentioned that you felt like you'd still only just scratched the surface of what you were able to do and what you were going to be doing, and you sort of hinted at some of the things that you were looking forward to next. Is there anything that you want to share about that, about what's coming down the?
Well, we're at Clay Lacy, we're turning into a younger company. Where it's a 50-year-old company. There's some turnover in some key positions, and just in terms of a natural evolution of a company, of people retiring and people just changing, and the new leadership and the new mid-level management that are coming up are all just incredibly bright, incredibly smart people, and they're used to working in analytic systems. They're used to working in Excel. They're used to working with data at a much deeper level, and they have a hunger to get involved. They want to be citizen developers. They want to get in. One of the things that we really want to do with Apex is structure our setup in a way that every department sort of has their area where we can turn loose citizen developers to do things within sort of the bumper bowling method of getting them going, of building out what they need, but without having the drag of having to come to the IT group and work out the whole statement of work, and then come back to them and build it, and then do the iterations and all that. If we can do a lot of that simple stuff and just set them up with a good setup of, here's the common data objects, here are some standards you need to follow, and make sure that they do it really, really well, we can do so much so quickly with Apex. Just by having those citizen developers engaged. And that way, the serious hard work, that's back end stuff, building out really robust packages, building, focusing on really, really good tools for our customer facing group and for our flight crews, that's where we can spend our money. That's where we can spend the real horsepower between our internal guys and our contractors, and really, focus on making that just a complete game changing, cutting edge experience relative to what's in the market today. And we've got, I just can't even, there's so many people I could mention just internally that want to participate and want to participate deeply. And they're just really, I can't wait to get them in. I don't want to get them in too fast, because then it'll be like sort of the SharePoint world where you've got a billion SharePoint sites and, none of it's well. So we want to do that on a throttle, but that's sort of the next natural evolution. And I just can't wait to get there. It's going to be awesome.
Indeed. Well, I do want to cover before we close, and that is the good work you guys are doing locally. I always feel like the real work when it comes to communities is done at the local level. The national orgs are, they're well funded, and they've got a lot of a lot of support around them. But at the local level, I think it's really dependent on personalities, and you've got to have these things succeed or they fail. By locally pulling the strings and getting people organized and pulling speakers together. And you guys have been very successful there in DFW. I know Christoph, going back to Oracle, maybe something you guys hadn't planned on, but you and Jackie and Christoph have done great work.
We had a good group, and also Adam and Chris from Region 10. They stepped up. They provided their facility for us to have our meetups. Christoph, when he was still at Accenture, was great for bringing stuff in. Jackie was great for bringing in speakers. I mean, everybody carried their role in it. And there was an early tradition that got started by Doug Galt when we first started the meetup, of really reaching out and doing a really good job of bringing people in and keeping it relevant, keeping it interesting. And obviously Doug migrated back to Oracle, so he had to roll off because of the way those rules work. And so as Oracle is bringing in more top players for the new initiatives that they're doing internally, it's sort of taking a big bite out of the meetup. So Jackie and I were talking, and actually we're going to have lunch on Monday and sort of talk about what's next, because now we're coming out of COVID. We could actually start doing better meetups. So many people were doing virtuals that was really hard to do a meetup virtual of our meetup group, because other people were doing great virtuals, and it would be redundant. But we're talking about when we can go back to doing, face-to-face meetups and what that'll look like, and reaching out to some people that have come up in the Dallas area. Cause I know Adam and Chris will be in, I know Christoph will still want to participate, even if he can't be in a leadership role. I'll bring Brian along because, he's always great to have there. And then newer guys who are into the group, like Marvin, who works for Insum. He's a local resource that was really starting to, plug in more. and show some of the stuff that he was working on. So we'll get a new sort of core group. Once we can start meeting again, the core group will naturally evolve, and we'll pick up where we left off and start bringing in speakers and start getting on that game again.
Well, without obviously COVID has been a huge challenge. So without talking about COVID, let's say there was no COVID. What are some of the challenges that you face locally? Because there's other people in other communities across the country that would like to put together an Apex user community. What do you say to those guys? Yeah, what kind of challenges? What kind of successes?
Our biggest challenges was location by far, because Dallas-Fort Worth is so big. We got relatively lucky with Incotech early on, because they're sort of central. They're in Las Colinas, which is sort of right in between. It's in the Irving area. That really helped. But we would see significant drop off if we wanted to bring in like folks from Fort Worth. That's a long haul to go over to Dallas to do an hour and a half meetup. It's like no amount of after activity at the local watering hole is going to motivate everybody to want to come over. And so there's a classic Dallas Fort Worth thing that goes on. And so really tackling that is sort of the biggest thing, because we really want to bring in people from the area. And there are more people that, there's a lot of people in Dallas that work from home, that work in the Oracle universe and the Apex universe, that we would like to, bring in. And so by moving around, what became successful for us was moving around. So we would ping pong back and forth between Region 10 and Las Colinas. And we'd like to start pinging over to Fort Worth also, so that, we create that opportunity where people can come out local to where they are and make it convenient for them. And I think that really was our biggest challenge.
Oh, I think that's a great idea. In fact, here in Houston, if we have similar, any of these large metros, we're going to have the same problem. And I was thinking that there's no way, you have to move it around, but it has to be done at a frequency that, it can't be once a year that you're in the Woodlands, or once a year that you're down at Clear Lake. It's got to be more frequent than that, at least quarterly. And then that means that you're doing something, at least every month in order to hit all these spots. It's a lot of work. Of work, and you and Jackie and Christoph and the others that you mentioned deserve a lot of credit for keeping this thing going.
I think and just being good at doing quarterly. We got into our good cadence early, where we worked around the trade show cycle. So we would do the quarter before and the quarter after K-Scope. It's like, what's coming in K-Scope that's interesting, and let everybody who's going to do a speaking engagement at K-Scope come in and do their dry runs and rehearsals right before. So like the month before K-Scope, come in and do your rehearsal. We'll chew it up. I remember 2 years ago, Jackie was doing her thing on JavaScript, all the simple things you could do with JavaScript. And so she came in and we did a great thing. We had about 25 people. And we gave her, I don't know, maybe 40 individual feedback items, and she rolled those in, and it was great at K-Scope. And then we did a post K-Scope. So we would always do a thing the month after K-Scope, and that spanned a quarter, a net. And it would be what was interesting at K-Scope. And we would do, interesting use cases of how much you use that, and talk about, well, I saw, Dimitri did web components. I want to do a component over here in this app that I'm doing, because I want to be able to do it like DOM manipulation in a cleaner way than I'm doing today. Stuff like that. And so we framed it around that. And if you look at the schedule, where you have Europe and their cycle, and then the US, you can cover four meetings just doing that cycle. And it makes, then you just worry about, the rest of the year is like, find a couple of speakers on, emerging ideas, or just whatever people are blogging about, or putting out on Twitter, or putting out on apex.world, bring those in and fill that gap there, spark some, ideas. And then that cycle just starts to feed on itself. And especially it's hard in the Apex world. It's really, really hard, because a lot of people can't talk about what they're working on. They would love to, but you can't go into a public meetup and say, yeah, I'm building a thing for, this laboratory over here that's a government program. You just can't talk about it, and most people working with Apex, honestly, most people can't talk about their work. So everything is this theoretical. So you have to come up with these ways of using things sort of in a vacuum, where you're like, well, in a perfect world, if I was doing something kind of like that, it would be this.
Right.
Imp and Dep, man, from you. Imp and Dep.
Yep.
Monty, is that your dog barking in the background?
I was hoping you guys wouldn't hear that. No, I've got 1001 Dalmatians playing on the TV. What I was going to say too is, if somebody wants to get in touch, if they're thinking about doing something locally, how would they get in touch with the DFW Apex group? Is there a meetup page?
We're on Meetup. The best way to get a hold of us is to go on the Meetup. and just join the meetup. And then the organizers get pinged, and we know you are, and we'll do a howdy, and then we'll reach out and connect and make sure that you know where we're at, and if we have whatever is next up. We don't have anything currently scheduled because obviously we're still coming out of COVID, but as soon as we get something scheduled, we'll start pinging the meetup folks, everybody in our crew, because it's interesting. We have a national audience between our locals and the other people that are part of our meetup, just because they come in and guest with us, so they stay in our group. We're up to 99 people in our
great.
meetup, and I think that puts us third nationally behind, I think, Virginia and New York. So we want to keep that going and get all those groups engaged.
Well done. Michelle, how about we let Brad discuss the two truths and a lie here? Brad, go through these things here.
Mm-hmm.
And tell us which one is the lie.
We have had some votes, by the way. So, and I don't want to mispronounce your name. I'm sure I will. Is it Myrta?
Myrta.
She doesn't believe the pilot. She thinks that's the lie. Tanvir also thinks, I don't know if Tanvir knows you, but also saying pilot. And Shabir thinks New York Yankee is the lie.
Okay. So I can tell you that, yes, I did work for Tina Turner as a roadie.
Come on.
No, really. Not really.
Do you have proof?
I do have proof right there. Me and Mom right there.
No way.
Yeah. Back, and I was god awful young. That was 96, 97. My first career was in entertainment. I did that for 10 years. Touring with bands all over. And a bunch of people know that already, actually, that are in the Apex group, because it always devolves into that after we started after events at K-Scope. I was born in New York. My father worked for American Airlines, and when they opened DFW Airport, when I was 4 years old, we transferred down to DFW as part of the opening of the airport down here. But I was from New York. My whole family. I still have a ton of family up, all scattered through the northern, upstate New York. So I am a Yankee. But I am not a pilot, because the last thing you would want me is behind the stick of an aircraft that either I'm in or anybody I would not want to. I don't want that responsibility. I'm more than happy to let the professionals do that.
And is this bit true that you'd rather be a passenger margarita in hand?
There's very little I would have rather not do with margarita in hand. I mean, seriously, I've been in Texas long enough that a margarita makes everything better.
So you're grounded now. You've got roots. You're not going back to New York.
No, I'm going to stay here. Definitely. If anything, I mean, I would certainly go back on the road, but my wife would kill me. So, I mean, that's the whole reason I got off the road, was so that we could have a family and settle down, because I was gone. I was traveling 300 plus days a year. And that was just
300 plus. Wow.
Yeah. And there was just no starting a family and moving on. So that was the real impetus to change careers. And I just happened to switch over from being effectively a hardware person to being a software person. And that was, that switch happened in 1998, 99, and jumped right into Oracle at the time. And it's just been all Oracle and then all Apex ever since.
Well, we're happy to have you a part of the Apex community. I'm happy to call you a friend of mine, and we really thank you for participating here today. We really do appreciate it. Would you come back and join us again sometime?
Sure, absolutely. This is a lot of fun.
Well, maybe when that portal rolls out, we could share some success stories then.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Michelle, would you cue the music, and we'll dance on out of here, get everybody back to work. Thank you all for participating. And I hope you enjoyed being on the inside. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Insum Insider.